Welcome back to the Acceptance Project podcast. I'm your host, Bryan. I'm really glad you decided to join us today. Because if you're here, then there's a decent chance you've been asking some big questions lately, or at least quietly thinking about them while pretending you're just fine and totally have it all together. Spoiler alert, none of us do. Today, we're setting out on a bit of a road trip. No GPS, no perfectly folded map, just a slightly crumpled roadmap back to ourselves. The version of you that existed before life handed you expectations, roles, and a personality shaped by other people's opinions. You know, the you before adulthood turned into a group project you never signed up for? We'll laugh a little, probably side-eye our past choices, and maybe even uncover a few truths we've been dodging like unpaid parking tickets. But we'll do it together, because this isn't about reinventing ourselves into something shiny and new. It's about finding our way back to what's always been there. So go ahead and grab whatever you drink when you're thinking deeply or avoiding responsibility, settle in, and let's start exploring the roads that lead us home. Today, we're talking about something that every single one of us goes through, whether we admit it or not. The long, messy, confusing journey of rediscovering who you really are. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. This episode was inspired by a friend who recently shared a book with me, and at first glance, it looked like one of those sort of touchy-feely, let's cry into herbal tea while journaling under a weighted blanket type of book. And I've cried. I've cried over Stranger Things, commercials, burnt cornbread, a dog wearing shoes. But this one, well, I have to admit, I smiled politely and thanked them for the book. Meanwhile, thinking, I am not a kumbaya kind of person, but here we are. But here's the thing. I put assumptions aside. I actually sat with it, and once I did, something unexpected happened. It started telling the truth about me. The parts I don't always want to see or especially acknowledge, the parts I've been avoiding, and the parts of me I've been trying to get back to. My friend read it during a hard stretch of their life. Years of dealing with depression and addiction and feeling lost had finally piled up high, so they couldn't see over the top of it anymore. They said the book helped them begin a journey back to themselves, a journey where they rediscovered who they were and redefined ideas they thought they understood. So let's start with a few questions, a few simple questions. What is family? What is home? Who is the real you when you aren't performing for the world? Who are you when you stop pretending you have it all figured out? How do you re-immerse yourself in a world that sometimes doesn't make sense anymore? See, we don't talk enough about how hard it is to come back to yourself after life has knocked you sideways. That process isn't clean. It isn't pretty. It doesn't come with a guidebook or warning labels, but it's the most important trip you will ever take. We all get lost in different ways. Some of us lose ourselves trying to be what our families want. Some of us lose ourselves in careers, relationships, addictions, and expectations. And some of us simply drift until one day we wake up and think, whose life is this? And how did I get here? And who exactly have I been trying to impress? So as I was reading this book, there was one sentence that really just sort of jumped out at me, grabbed me by the shoulders and gave me a good shaking. And the statement was, the life you are living might be someone else's dream for you. Think about that. How many choices have you made because someone else expected you to? How much of your personality was shaped by you trying to play it safe? How much of your life have you lived for applause you never received? I had to sit with that one for a long time because the truth is sometimes our lives end up looking like a Pinterest board someone else designed. And here's another question. What would you choose if nobody was watching? That one hits a little too close, doesn't it? If no one had opinions about your choices, if no one was keeping score, if no one expected anything from you, who would you be? Where would you go? What would you do? I think the real you has been waiting, patiently and quietly, maybe even desperately, waiting for you to stop running, stop apologizing, stop shrinking, and waiting for you to finally say, okay, I'm ready. Sometimes the loudest guidance we ever receive comes from the silence we sit with, that uncomfortable silence where our thoughts seem too loud, the silence where we hear all the voices we have collected over the years, those voices that tell us we aren't enough, we don't matter, or nobody cares what you have to say. That one kept me from pursuing my dream of this podcast and speaking for many years. Those voices are lies, all of them. Not one of them belongs to the real you. Most of those voices are recycled comments from people who never knew how to love us, or fears we've rehearsed for so long they sound like truth, or wounds we pressed into our skin so deeply they started to feel like birthmarks. But you are allowed to outgrow the lies you were taught to believe. And if you ever need a time to really sit with that silence, I'll tell you what I've done. I've driven cross country 7 times. Most of those has been with just my dog Max and I. Driving cross country is a great way to get inside your head, think about things that you haven't thought about in a long time, and kind of process that. Max a great road trip dog. He loves road trips. So those road trips were 3 or 4 days of therapy for me. So I encourage that. You see beautiful scenery and you really get a time to just think. And that brings me back to my friend. They told me I realized I didn't know how to define things I thought I understood: family, home, love, self, safety, identity. Isn't that wild? We can go our entire lives not knowing we need new definitions. Maybe family isn't just blood. Maybe family is whoever hands you a flashlight when you're walking through the dark. Maybe home isn't a place. Maybe home is the moment you don't feel like a stranger in your own skin. Maybe identity isn't a final product. Maybe it's a collection of choices we make every day to show up as honestly as we can. And maybe rediscovery isn't about becoming someone brand new. Maybe it's about returning to the version of you who existed before the world told you who you had to be. Have you ever heard the phrase burning bridges? Sometimes when we talk about burning bridges, we're talking about, don't, like, if you're leaving a job, don't burn the bridge behind you. You never know when you may need to go back to it. But there are some bridges that are worth burning. Bridges that we've crossed where we realize, I don't care how bad things get, I'm not going back that way. And probably most of us have at least one bridge behind us that still smells faintly of smoke. The relationship we kept repainting, hoping it would stop wobbling. The job we stayed in because the paycheck showed up on time even when the leadership never did. I had supervisors who mistook authority for volume and leadership for humiliation. The kind of people who could turn a Monday into a personality disorder. Looking back, I realized they were excellent teachers. Not just in the way they intended to be, though. They taught me exactly who I never wanted to become, which is a surprisingly useful lesson once you stop grinding your teeth long enough to notice it. There comes a moment when you are standing at the edge of that bridge, pockets full of reasons to stay and a heart that already packed its bags. That is when I recommend striking the match, not out of anger, not for drama, but for clarity. Let the wood crackle, let the rope snap, and keep walking while the flames do their honest work. Don't turn around to renegotiate with the smoke. You are not going that way anymore. Besides, nothing ruins personal growth faster than standing around watching something burn and wondering if you should rebuild it with the same broken blueprint. And here's the magic of burning bridges. If you do it with intention, you do not leave empty handed. You leave carrying insight, boundaries, and a sharper sense of self respect. Growth is not always polite or even comfortable for that matter. Sometimes it smells like smoke and sounds like a door closing with conviction. But if you peel back the layers, there is always a lesson tucked inside, waving like a little flag that says, hey, remember this? Humor helps too, because one day you will laugh and say, well, that bridge had termites anyway. And that is wisdom speaking, not regret. And one more thing, bridges were made to make travel easier. Maybe it crosses a raging stream of water. Maybe it crosses deep valleys where building a road was too difficult. Regardless, that bridge wasn't made to stand on and take in the view. It was meant to cross rough terrain and keep moving forward to the experiences that lie ahead. Now, I have to admit, this part of the podcast, as I was putting my notes together and thinking about like what I want to talk about, this part I kind of laughed about because I imagined myself being a bus driver and stopping the bus and who I would kick off the bus and be like, no, you're done. Off you go. So at some point on every journey, you realize the bus is getting heavy and it's not just the luggage. It's the people riding along who stopped paying rent a long time ago. They take up space, complain about the route, and keep asking why you are not headed back to a version of life that nearly broke you. You check the return on investment and you realize it's costing you peace, sleep, and way too much mental energy. That is when you reach for the microphone, clear your throat, and announce the next stop. No apology is required to exit. Some people never offer the one you deserve anyway. And maybe here's a good spot to remind you to revisit the podcast from December the 2nd called Protect Your Peace: What Deserves Your Energy and What Doesn't. Kicking people off the bus is not cruelty, it's logistics. You cannot move forward while someone keeps grabbing the emergency brake in your head. Allowing them to live rent-free up there in the penthouse of your mind is expensive real estate, and you have better plans for it. That space is reserved for laughter that shows up unexpectedly, friendships that refill your cup, love that feels safe, and the anticipation of a life that does not revolve around old wounds. The bus gets lighter the moment they step off, even if your hands shake a little while you hand them that revoked ticket. The journey does not suddenly become easy. In fact, there are plenty of stops ahead where you will repeat the process. Each stop comes with an announcement and the quiet courage to say, "This is where you get off." And people you kicked off the bus may even be waiting at the next stop trying to get back on. Sometimes it is a relationship. Sometimes it is a version of yourself that keeps trying to earn approval from people who never planned to give it. Growth has a funny way of sounding like an awkward intercom message, followed by the squeak of doors opening and closing for the last time. And at every stop, there's purpose. Sometimes you clean out the car and toss the emotional trash you have been hauling around. Sometimes you stretch your legs and breathe in the fresh air and remember why you started driving in the first place. Maybe you pick up a small token of remembrance, not as a souvenir of pain, but as proof that you survived that stretch of the road. Then you get back on the highway, windows down, music up, knowing the journey is still hard, but at least now it's yours. So as we come to the end, I want to say that I hope this episode has spoken to you and maybe made you think about who you are, who you wish you were, or maybe even how much you miss the you that you lost but want back. If that happened, then I hope you will take time today to share this podcast with someone else who may be on the journey of self-discovery or maybe even rediscovery. Also, check out bridgingsuccess.com because we're always adding new material, and then there are some new events that will be live, and I hope you can join us from the comfort of your own home. I'm going to share those in the weeks to come. I also encourage you, as you're listening, thinking about what we're talking about, reach out, maybe just some feedback. Let us know if you like what we're doing or maybe some suggestions for improvement. Or maybe even there's some potential future podcast ideas that maybe you think would be great to really explore at that certain time of the year. Whatever it is, we want to hear from you. So be sure and go to the bridgingsuccess.com website and click on the Contact Us and send us a quick email. I'd love to hear from you. So just remember, coming back to yourself is not a straight line. It's a spiral. You revisit old places with a new understanding. You redefine words you thought were settled. You release lives that looked good on paper but never felt like home in your bones. So until next time, take care of yourself and take care of one another. The Acceptance Project podcast is a production of Bridging Success, LLC. To learn more about the podcast and our work, please visit bridgingsuccess.com. This podcast and its contents are for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. I'm Dr. Bryan Gross, but I'm not a licensed therapist. The topics and opinions shared by me and any guests are our own and should not replace professional or medical advice. If you're seeking mental health support, medical guidance, or help with personal matters, please reach out to a licensed professional who can provide the individual support you need.